Hey friends, in this video I'm going to lead you through a series of stretches to target the hamstrings, and I will also lead you into splits and over splits training. However, you can totally skip the splits training if you like and just focus on developing your hamstring flexibility. So this can be appropriate for all levels. Just go ahead and take what you will. So we're bending the left knee in and then extending the leg out in front. We'll repeat that a few times. And then draw the knee in toward the chest and draw some circles. And just notice the sensation at the back of the pelvis. And we'll circle the other direction. At this time, you're also being observant of your breath and encouraging some depth there. And now straighten the leg up and release it to the floor. And we'll repeat that on the other side. So bending the right knee in and extending it back out. And finally hugging it in and circling. And circle the other direction. Now send the foot toward the sky. You can drop the toes down toward the body and up to the ceiling, and then bring the other leg up as well. Drop the toes, point the toes up, drop, point, bend at the knees, and again with the toes, pointing and flexing. Bring the legs to the sky again, and then go ahead, bring the knees wide, take hold just at the shins, and then draw the knees in towards the torso and away again. You can also rock side to side here. You can straighten your legs if that feels good. And again, you can rock, bringing the pelvis forward in toward the torso and then toward the front of your mat as well. Let's close the knees together. Bring yourself up to hands, knees, and feet. Press the left foot back, pressing into the ball of the foot. And you can shift your weight forward and back. And notice how this feels along the back of your left leg. So gently coming forward and back. We'll switch sides, pressing the right ball of the foot down, dropping the heel, and then lifting it as you shift forward. Good hold and release. Take the left leg up and straight back behind you, and I want you to move from your hip flexor, so you're lifting the leg from the hip, not from the knee, and just pulsing nice small pulses with a strong leg. We'll do this on the other side. Tuck the toes under and set the hips back. Come forward and shift back. So keeping a rhythmic movement here, forward and back. Then you can go ahead and slide the hands forward. The hips go high for puppy pose. If the chest does not come to the floor easily, you could rest the forehead on the ground here. If it does reach, then you have chest and chin on the floor. And then from here, we'll take the hips up and step the feet to the distance that feels right for a downward facing dog. And you'll notice my knees are very bent here. So you can go ahead and start out with pretty bent knees and shifting forward and back to acclimate into your down dog, gradually straightening out the knees and dropping the heels. alternating lifting onto the toes and dropping the heels can be a great way to bring those hamstrings into play in a safe and healthy way. So now find your own alignment in the down dog. You can move around, shifting your hips side to side. Notice if anything feels stuck or sticky, or if you feel fluid or strong, just observing the state of the body. And we'll start to shift forward, taking the feet toward the hands, coming to a standing forward fold. And you may want to use blocks at this time. So you can rest your hands on blocks. And I do recommend a good amount of bend in your knees as you just begin to fold. This can be a lot on the hamstrings. And you can alternate between raising your spine, lifting, and then sinking and settling a little bit deeper. And see if you can match these movements with your breath. So you're inhaling as you rise and exhaling as you fold deeper in. But if you are feeling good, you can bring the hands all the way to the ground, but you could also keep the blocks as you walk the hands to the left and over to the right. Just moving gently at this time. Good. Step the feet back, knees down to the ground. And we'll lower the pelvis down to the ground for a cobra. So you can bring yourself down to forearms. This is a gentler back bend, or you can press your hands under the shoulders and lift from there. So you want the shoulders to draw back and down, as you can see mine are here. And then you may want to find some movement in the cobra, maybe little twists in your torso, or maybe you take the head back to stretch the throat or look over one shoulder or the other. From there, we'll take the hips back and transition to a downward facing dog once again. Walk the feet toward the hands and fold in. Feel free to use blocks here. Feel free to bend the knees as much as you need. We're not trying to wrench down into the fold. And then you can just start to melt upward, one vertebrae at a time, finishing with the neck and the head. And reach the arms up and overhead. The arms will really slowly descend to come down by your sides. Tuck the tailbone forward. And you can take the head side to side, gentle stretches of the neck. All right, so next, we're going to take the left foot back and the right foot forward, and both of my feet are pointed toward the front edge of my mat. So my hips are squared, and I reach forward. And then bring the hands down to the floor or to blocks. So whatever is working well for you today. And you can fold in toward the front leg. I really recommend that you're squeezing your legs toward each other and toward the midline here for stabilization. You can lift and sink in a little bit with the flow of your breath if that feels good. So the inhalation takes you lighter and the exhalation sinks you deeper. So now the back foot turns out, opening into a triangle. So I'm stacking one arm over the other, and you can take the bottom hand wherever it feels good. So maybe to a block, maybe to the floor, maybe to the leg itself. You can look upward, downward, or somewhere in between. Just pay attention to how the neck feels here. You're really opening across the chest. And then go ahead and turn both of your feet slightly in and fold towards center. You could again use blocks here. This is a very stable pose that offers a lot of control, so you may like to shift around, adjust the feet and the legs. Enjoy the stable stretch. We'll go ahead and lift, straightening the arms, and turn toward the back edge of your mat now. So the left foot is forward, the right foot is back. Returning to our scissors pose, reaching forward, staying really engaged through the spine. And lowering the hands. Again, feel free to use blocks or the hands come to the floor. Pulsing here. Breathing in to lengthen and lift, and breathing out to sink a little bit deeper. Go ahead and turn the back foot out, open into your triangle shape. Again, feel free to use a block. You're opening across the chest, stabilizing through the legs. The back foot has a little bit of lift under the arch. In fact, both feet do, as you ground down through the outer edge. You can move the top arm a little bit and see how that feels. And then bring both hands down and to center. Again, turning the feet slightly in, folding, and enjoying the stretch at center. So it's a wide-legged standing forward bend in yoga called Prasarita Padottanasana. And here I'm taking it into a downward dog type of shape. So I'm reaching the hands in front and sinking my chest. So you can really just move how it feels good here. You can reach for one foot and toward the other, just being symmetric in whatever you do, balancing the sides of the body. All right, we'll reorient toward the front of the mat, bring the back knee down, find your blocks. And you want the blocks to be stacked just about under your shoulders. Notice that my front knee is right over the ankle. And now I'm going to support myself using the blocks and pulse. So when I breathe in, I lift up slightly. And when I breathe out, I sink in to intensify the stretch. So we're really addressing the hip flexors on the back leg with this pose, but also hamstrings of the front leg. If you're feeling strong, you can remove the blocks and clasp the hands on the front thigh and just use the strength and integrity of your legs for the support you need to move in a controlled way. Good, and then you'll bring your hands toward the left. Open your left leg out so the toes are up toward the sky. And you can't see very well, but my right heel is lifted off the floor. So what I'm really doing is getting into the inner thigh of my left leg. And you can play around with that, pointing and flexing the foot. And just adjusting yourself at the hip, maybe moving a little bit in that range of motion you have at where the femur meets the pelvis to see how you can modulate the stretch. So we'll come back to facing forward and now tuck the toes of the back foot under and straighten the front leg as you fold over it. Now, in this case, I recommend the front foot to be relaxed or even pointed. Many people will recommend that you flex it to increase intensity. And I recently learned that drawing the toes in affects more nerve than musculature, so I think it might be better to just focus on the musculature at this time. But go ahead and practice in the way that feels really productive for you, listening to your body. You can again find a gentle pulsation here of lifting and sinking. All right, go ahead and transition back to downward facing dog. Take the feet wide for a wide-legged dog. Now we'll bring the left foot forward, stacking the knee over the ankle, and we'll do it all on the other side. So the blocks come under the shoulders, and you're rising and settling with the breath. Feel free to continue with the blocks or bring the hands to the front leg. Now I'm showing you, see that the front knee is really nicely stacked over the ankle. You also don't want that knee to start to come outward toward the left edge of your mat. You want it to be coming straight out from your hip, aligned nicely. And now you'll see the back angle of the stretch we did on the other side, where I'm up on the ball of the left foot now, and my right leg is out, receiving a beautiful stretch. The toes are toward the sky, and really targeting inner thigh muscles. And you can really accentuate this nicely with the movements of the foot and the ankle. So rhythm is really amazing when we're trying to work with flexibility. Rhythm can help a lot to send messages to the nervous system that this is safe and fine, so that your nervous system actually allows your muscles to begin to stretch instead of sending them into a contraction response, which is pretty common when we have an elevated nervous system or higher stress level. So again, folding over the front leg. This time the toes on my back foot are not tucked under, so these are just two variations to have them tucked or not. I encourage you to experiment with how each of those options feels. I do like toes tucked under for the stretch that they give to the bottom of the foot, especially if you are doing any sort of dance or aerial where your toe point starts to make your foot a little crampy because you use the muscles so much. All right, so from here, transition to a seated position, and we'll take both feet wide out to the sides. If you find that your low back is sinking backward and you're unable to sit upright, you should take a blanket under your sit bones. That can help quite a lot. So turn toward the left leg and just fold a little bit. Turn toward the right leg, fold just a little bit, shoulders toward the ankle. And then face forward, slide the hands out in front, and see where you end up in this one. So I'm going to demonstrate the pancake, where I'm going to work on getting my belly and my chest on the ground. But you do not have to worry about this. If this is not happening at this time, that's fine. Simply focus on bringing sensation of stretching to your inner thigh muscles and hamstrings. All right, we'll close the legs together. Bring the right foot in and take the left leg out at a slight angle and fold over the leg. So you are aiming your belly toward your thigh. Sometimes people get the idea that you want your head toward your knee, but that actually takes a stretch out of the low back. So we want the stretch to be along the spine, the full length of the spine. So think about lengthening through your back as you reach over the leg. And you can also really accentuate the stretch in the back of the leg by pressing the knee down toward the floor. If there is some space under your knees and it doesn't feel good to do that, you may want to tuck a blanket or a sweatshirt under the space under your knee for support. So do make an effort to balance your shoulders across so they're level with each other. And you're also pressing down through the bent leg, stabilizing the pose. Go ahead and rise up. Find your way to your back. You can reach the arms overhead and pick your hips up off the ground. You can always use a block to support under the hips. Here we're really primarily providing relief to your hip flexors and quads after being engaged quite a bit in the previous poses. So the weight shifts up into the shoulders as you do this. Let the hips down. So next we're going to prepare the hamstrings for deeper stretching by alternating dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. So plantar, toes pointed. Dorsiflexion, toes drop toward the body. So the way we do this is keep the toe pointed as you lengthen the leg, straightening out. Then drop your toes as you bring the heel back toward the butt, bending the knee. So you're breathing in to lift with a pointed toe and breathing out to drop the heel back down, bending the knee. So this can take quite a bit of coordination. No worries if it doesn't click right away. Just go ahead and practice your best. And we'll do 10 each side. Follow along with the breath. Nice, release, and we'll change sides. So dorsiflexion, plantar flexion. We're going to alternate that, breathing in to lift, breathing out to lower. 10 at your own pace. Now we're going to use a belt to stretch deeper into the hamstrings. You could use a scarf or a arm of a sweater or sweatshirt. Obviously a belt is ideal, but do what you got to do. We'll extend the right leg out in front. The belt is around the ball of the foot. And you might want to explore the difference between pulling the leg in with your low back pressed down and arched. So we actually want the low back to be a little bit arched, so there's a little bit of space underneath, because this helps us to more specifically target the hamstrings. So you'll feel like you can't stretch as far as normal when you keep that space under the low back, but that's good because you're not taking up the hamstring stretch into the low back. So we're interested right now in our hamstrings, so that's what we want to focus on. So striving to keep that space under the low back, you can pull in and release out a bit, finding that breath pulsation with your movements. Now we'll take the leg out to the left and find some movement, pulling the foot higher in toward the head and then releasing out. You can strengthen all of this even more by pressing forward through your right foot and engaging through the right leg. I'll go ahead and hold the foot as high as you can. and release. Now take the leg across the body, belt comes into the other hand. Left hand can reach out toward the left side. And again, you can pull the foot up toward the head and then release it back down to the level of the hip. We're juicing up the hip and leg muscles and lubricating the joint where the femur meets the pelvis. You reach the leg back upright, take off the belt, and extend the leg forward. So just rest here and feel the results of your efforts. Just noticing perhaps blood flow or a sense of relaxation. And then we'll move on to the other side. So belt comes around the ball of the right foot. Keep some space under your low back as you draw the leg in. Gently pulsing. And then we can go ahead and take the belt into just the right hand and release the leg out to the right side. So just as we did last time. Raise and lower the foot. And just exploring your range of motion, noticing what feels fluid, what feels sticky. Noticing what is the appropriate range for you to be working in and exploring that edge, but not barreling past it. Respecting your body's present boundaries and inquiring into them with a curiosity. And pull the foot up by the head and hold. And then go ahead, pass through center and cross the body. Belt comes into the left hand, right arm extends out. And looking over your right shoulder. Drawing the foot upward and down toward the hip. And release the belt, extend the leg out in front. Again, feeling into the results of your efforts, reaching the arms overhead behind you to stretch. And draw the knees in. I'm going to curl the toes under and lift the hips off the ground to release from that hip flexor engagement. And gently rest down one vertebrae at a time. So this next pose can be really challenging if you have tightness in your knees or ankles. If possible, you tuck the feet under and take your hands behind you for support, lifting the hips to stretch the quads. So this is one variation. You can also potentially lay all the way down on the ground or have a set of bolsters and blankets to rest upon. If this is too much for the knee or ankle, you might want to try just doing one leg at a time so the other leg would come out in front of you. This will release that pose. Find your blocks, and we are going to now approach our splits. So if you don't want to practice your splits, you're just working on hamstring flexibility, just skip through this part until we get to the warm down stretches. All right, so if you're using blocks, it's good for them to be pretty much under your shoulders, and you use them to controlled lift and sink. So you're gently exploring your range, trying to see if you can get the hips down to the ground. If you don't need your blocks, you can just set them aside and use your hands beside you. So the way a split works is you're stretching the hamstrings of the front leg and the hip flexors of the back leg, and they have to work together in that. So likely one side will be more limited than the other. In my case, I feel more limited in front leg hamstrings than back leg hip flexors. So that's why I really focus on hamstring flexibility when approaching splits, because my hip flexors are pretty good to go, but the hamstrings are more reluctant. So another person may experience the opposite, where it's the hip flexors that have the issue and the hamstrings are okay. So I'm exploring a square split as well by drawing the back hip forward and the front hip back slightly. This is great to work on. It usually raises your hips a bit higher as it is a more difficult position. So I'll switch over to the other side. And we pretty much all have a good side and a bad side on splits. This is my bad side. Most people that I've met are more comfortable with the right leg forward. For me, it is much more challenging. So I don't expect to get to the same depth that I do on the left side. So it's still really good to work on both sides and keep your body balanced. So I'm just working on sinking and rising in a controlled fashion. Now I'm going to draw my back hip forward, so back leg hip that is, and the right hip is going to go back slightly so I can work on my square splits. And you see this lifts me higher off the ground because it requires more flexibility, especially in the front hamstrings. I'm also supporting by tucking those back toes under to begin, and that helps me engage the leg more. So you want to not completely rely on gravity to make you flexible. You want to practice being strong, so engaging your leg muscles when you go into your end ranges of mobility. So that's really important to keep healthy and strong in your splits training. So now we'll approach the oversplit. I'm going to go back to my left side and set my heel on a block. So you could use pretty much any material that elevates your foot that is comfortable enough. And I'm letting my hips down to the ground. What you can't really see is that I am engaging my leg muscles. So I'm not just hanging out here, letting gravity do all the work. There are moments where I release to be more passive, but there is also quite a lot of firing through the leg muscles. So we'll release the front foot. If you want additional challenge, then stack another block, and you can keep stacking blocks as far as your flexibility takes you. So now I'm using the support of my hands to make sure I can safely get my hips down. A variation here, which I would do if I was a little more vigorously warmed up, is take your arms wide out to the sides and practice lifting yourself off the ground with just your leg muscles. So that's a great way to work on active flexibility. In this case, I didn't feel that I was warmed up enough and feeling strong enough to do that, so I'm doing more of my lift and lower using the support of the hands and arms. So you don't need to spend a whole lot of time there. I would say 30 to 60 seconds is fine. You can always repeat the stretch multiple times. That's a great way to develop your flexibility without making your muscles super stiff from staying in one position. So back to the right side. And I know it probably looks like I'm having an easy time, but this is actually a lot of work. So I'm also toning down my nervous system, letting it know that I'm doing this on purpose and I'm doing it safely. So I'll add the next block. And even if your hips don't come down all the way, I think it's valuable for you to practice at a greater height because it really helps out the front leg, particularly the hamstrings. And I know several teachers who will teach oversplits even if their student doesn't have a regular split yet, because it is a really nice way to train both the front hamstrings and the back hip flexors. All right, and we'll go ahead and release that. Find your way onto your back and go ahead, circle the knees. I'm going to tuck a block under my hips, bring my feet upward, and then just do what feels intuitively good. So bending at my knees, bringing my knees in, and then circling them out, taking them wide apart and back together. Tucking my toes under, removing the block from under the hips. And now taking a pigeon pose. So the right leg is crossed in front and the left leg behind. Make sure your hips are even. And if they're really high off the ground, you may like to support with a block or blanket. Just make sure you're not tipping one direction or the other. You can change the arm position, so now I'm propped up on my elbows. You can also take the chin into the hands and look up to stretch the throat if the neck is fine with that. It's a good variation here. We'll sit up, turn the left leg out, tuck the right foot in, brace yourself on the legs, and alternate dropping one shoulder and the other. And onward to the second side of pigeon. So tucking the left foot under the right hip, folding over even across the pelvis, so not tipped one way or the other. And go ahead, release. Turn the right leg out, left foot tucks in, brace yourself on the legs, and dip the shoulders one at a time. Soothing the low back. And you can go ahead and release that, and we'll find our way into a seated twist. So I'm bringing the right foot across, the left foot under by the opposite hip, elbow on the top leg knee, and the right hand is behind you for support as you look over the right shoulder. Lengthen upward through the spine and stay engaged in your core as you hold the twist. Release and switch the cross of the legs. Now turning toward your left with the left hand behind you to support the twist, finding integrity through the spine as you lift upward. Go ahead and release your twists, and if there are any other poses you'd like to enjoy, please feel free. Great work working on your hamstring flexibility and the splits if you chose to. I hope the video was helpful, and I wish you luck in your flexibility journey. Thanks so much for watching.